Good morning if you're in morning place. It is Friday, December 19th, 2025. This is DeProgram with Ted Rall and John Kiriakou. Thank you for liking, following, and sharing the show. A little bit of news for the YouTube side of the viewing audience. We've been approved for membership purchases. We'll be explaining a little bit about that, but basically what it means is that there will be a YouTube equivalent of the Rumble premiums. So we'll be able to, for the people who are allergic to Rumble, and as Robbie has explained, you should come over to Rumble because it's better for John and I, and therefore better for the show. But if you don't want to do that, it's a free country, sort of. So you can do it over on YouTube. It'll be $6.99, and you'll get premium stuff. We'll explain all the details about that. Let's see. Robbie West is going to be back on the board in about half an hour. He's always got a thing on. He's got an early morning obligation on Friday morning, but then he'll be here at about 9:30 Eastern time. So anything that goes wrong between now and the next 30 minutes is my fault. And that could well happen. Okay, so nice to see you, John.
Good to see you, Ted.
So let's talk about, here's the basic news we have for today. And as always, please feel free to chime in with your questions, comments, and so on in both the live chats on YouTube as well as on Rumble, as always. So there's been some reaction to the news that basically the ever-growing problem of Portuguese on Portuguese violence in the United States has led to policy changes. So basically, this Portuguese suspect who allegedly shot up a classroom at Brown and then murdered a professor, a nuclear physicist at MIT, and then himself basically had been harboring a grudge for all these years. Anyway, that's all the connection. We'll break that down. And in response to that, President Trump has suspended the green card lottery that has been in effect for many, many years under many years. Parties. We'll talk about what the green card lottery is, whether it's coming back, whether with pros and cons, all that. I am personally kind of just amazed, but not surprised that the DNC has just decided to quash its 2024 election autopsy because, after all, what is there to be learned from an after-action report?
Right, exactly.
And
may I add, they are purposefully, or purposely, I guess is the appropriate word in this case. They are purposely squelching this because they don't want the public to know that they are split on these social issues like trans rights and federal money for trans medical care and all this stuff that lost them the last election.
Exactly.
They're trying to pretend that it's not controversial.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's other aspects to it as well, which we'll get into. And President Trump has reclassified cannabis as a less dangerous drug. I think that's important. And this story out of Minnesota, which at first, John, I didn't really care about, Medicaid fraud, the scale of it is too big to ignore. I mean, basically over half of the $18 billion spent on Medicaid in the state of Minnesota over the last 7 years apparently has gone poof, has been stolen.
And it's being enjoyed in Mogadishu as we speak. And, I'll tell you, one of the things that bothers me the most about this is it's not being covered on CNN and MSNBC.
Yeah, and I hate to say this. I mean, look, my first instinct as someone who loves social programs and think Medicaid and Medicare are very important programs was to say, oh, God, I hate that this happened. But my second thing is, we got to make sure this doesn't happen again. It's not about covering it up, or you can't cover it up. No. I mean, that's the other thing, too. There's no point covering it up. But also you want to improve the system. Anyway, John, would you like to, let's see, I'm going to look at the feeds and see if there's anything we need to talk about, any questions we want to get to before we get into stuff. Okay, so how long is that drive from Brown University, which is in Providence, Rhode Island, to Boston? It's not far. It's about 2 hours, I'd say.
Yeah,
what would you say?
2 hours. Yeah, that's right.
Petlantis 48 saw a really interesting video that said that this Trump ballroom construction is a cover for an expansion of the PEOC bunker.
Yeah, I heard that. No, that's not true. The bunker's not over there. The bunker's on the other side. What's over there is the entrance to the tunnel to the Capitol that was last used by Nixon.
Was that Dick Cheney's secret undisclosed location?
I don't think so. I thought that he went out to Mount Weather. Yeah.
All right, John.
Yeah.
Another question for you from James Gemelis. Wanted your take on Senator Marino's bill to remove dual citizenship for all U.S. citizens. Well, I have thoughts about that too, since I'm a dual citizen also. I must have gotten 20 texts from other.
They're going to have to take this from my cold, dead hands.
Does it pass or is it DOA?
That's right. No, not going to happen. I mean, it could happen, but screw them.
What would you do? I mean, so you have Greek citizen, you have your Greek passport. I have my French passport. Would we just dip and go to France and Greece or whatever, anywhere in Europe, and just leave? Or would we? I mean, if you had to choose one, what would you do? I don't even know. I mean, I would be torn. On the one hand, I'm an American. I'm born in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Right.
I don't want to leave the United States. But on the other hand, if the United States is doing shit like this, I don't know if I want to be here.
Exactly. So, I don't know. I mean, my kids are here, so I'm stuck, but it would make me very, very angry.
Yeah, I mean, John, you know what my take on this is? This is one of those rare times when AIPAC is on our side, because all of the joint American-Israeli citizens would be up in arms over it.
Oh my God, yes.
They would not let it happen. So, all right. Not one of those things that, you see very often. All right. So, okay. So, Into Pain says it's 45 minutes from Providence to Boston.
No, that's it.
Is that true? I guess you'd have, maybe if you drive fast and there's no traffic. I don't know. Seems like it's a couple hours to me, because it's like 4.5 hours from New York to Boston.
Let's see.
So let's see. Okay, this is a good question. Nicholas Francos, for you, John. What language would you recommend to learn?
Arabic. That's an easy one. Arabic is spoken in 19 countries as a first language, and it would open up doors for you can't even comprehend. It's the smartest thing I ever did. And let me add,
Chinese.
Well, Chinese too. If I mean, that's sort of the future of business. But for me, I have zero interest in East Asia. And so, yeah, Arabic for me. And let me add, it is 57 minutes from Providence to Boston, 49 miles.
Okay. All right, here we go. Another question for you from Ali. John, question about the CIA. Do people that cover questions as analysts necessarily have to speak the language of the country they cover?
No.
Or have studied it in higher education?
No, and most of them don't, which is a shame, because, oh my God, I remember sitting in a briefing. It's like 2 days before we're attacking Iraq. And I give the morning briefing to the director, all the deputy directors, the associate deputy directors. We're all in this big conference room. And then, sorry, I had this oral surgery the other day, and I'm spitting out pieces of stitches.
Oh God.
Anyway,
good times.
Yeah, it's just grand. So I can only eat so many mashed potatoes. I haven't eaten anything because I'm tired of oatmeal and mashed potatoes. But anyway, so there are all these Iraq analysts, not a single one of whom speaks a single word of Arabic. And they're talking about Tikrit. And I whisper to the kid next to me, it's Tikrit.
Yeah.
Not Tikrit.
Even I know that, and I don't know any Arabic.
And then they'll say Nineveh. They're in the area of Nineveh. It's like, not Nineveh, you moron. It's Nineveh. They can't get any of the names right. it would just drive me crazy. And then there was this constant fight. And I apologize for getting down in the weeds, but the people who are in charge of the geographic place names, they also don't speak the language. So they tried to force us to say Al-Basra, Al-Mosul. Okay, then that's fine if that's what you're trying to force us to do. Then why don't we say Al-Kuwait or Al-Bahrain or Ad-Doha? Why is it okay for some to actually do the Arabic name and not okay for others to do the Arabic name? You morons. There's no consistency. And so I just did whatever I wanted.
Well, John, that's analogous to how in the news media, somehow if a name or a word is in Spanish, even if you're a non-Spanish speaker, you're supposed to say Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. There was a book that Charles Krauthammer wrote about exactly that. The book was like, why do liberals always try to use a Spanish accent when saying the names of Spanish countries? Like, did you see the news from Nicaragua?
Totally. Honduras. And I catch myself doing it too. And I'm like, wait, I'm doing that. We don't say like, Moskva or Paris,
or Deutschland.
Right. Yeah. Roma. We don't say any of those things.
Oh, I hate when people do that. Oh my God.
It's a funny affectation for sure.
Hair Maven Incorporated says, seems ridiculous not to be fluent in a language of a country that you're covering, particularly for nuance. Exactly.
True.
Agreed. Exactly right. Everybody should be trained in the language of the country that they're covering, especially if you're going to spend the next 10 or 20 years working on that country.
Yeah, not to mention if you have to read stuff that's in the source language, right?
Yes.
Rob Steiner, John, did you ever have any interaction with Catherine Gunn, our GCHQ whistleblower? GCHQ is, correct me if I'm wrong, the NSA of the UK, right?
Yes.
In 2004, she leaked a document that the U.S. was bugging world leaders to get them on their side to go to war in Iraq.
I'm proud to say that Catherine's a friend of mine. She was absolutely heroic in what she did. The penalties in the UK are far worse than what they are in the United States for revealing classified information. But she did something that I think was a great public service to all British citizens. She told them where their leaders stood on Iraq and why they stood there. Yeah, I'm very proud to call her a friend.
Frasmataz says, after the second plane hit the World Trade Center, and as the threat to Washington became clear, Cheney was evacuated from his office by Secret Service and taken to the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, a bunker beneath the White House. He was there.
Is that where it was?
He was there for most of the day, coordinating the administration response alongside national security officials. Later in the day, he was moved to a series of undisclosed locations, which he later revealed included his official residence, his house in Wyoming, and Camp David. So he was hopscotching around. By the way, John, we've never talked about this. I always felt it was a very bad look for the president and for the top leadership of the country to be missing from the airwaves all day on 9/11.
Totally agree. The whole country was in a state of panic.
Yeah. It was, it was just kind of like, come on, one of you guys, even if we just seen Bush on Air Force One, that would have been fine.
That's right.
Just
a word to calm the nation,
Yeah, we're on top of it. We're working on it.
Most.
Here's what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay. Cooper Duper says, try some Greek yogurt, John. I'm sure that's crossed your mind.
I'm at the very bottom of my giant jug of Greek yogurt right now. with Greek honey from Crete on top of it.
Effie said, thanks for the $2. What was your favorite secret identity or cover story you enjoyed as a CIA operator?
I was on a plane one time from Milan to Sofia, Bulgaria. And I never talk to people on planes. I just want to mind my own business, read a book, watch a movie, whatever. I'm on this flight from Milan, and there's this big, fat Italian university professor next to me, and he wouldn't shut his flapping gums the whole flick. And he kept asking me questions, and I'm giving him one-word answers. And I'm kind of rude, like I keep going back to my book. And finally he says, well, what do you do for a living?
Oh, God.
And I'm undercover, right? I'm with an alias passport on this trip. And I said to him, look, I smuggle women and cigarettes from Eastern Europe. Are you happy now? And he goes, well, like this. I don't think I approve. I said, I didn't ask for your fucking approval. Now shut your mouth. And he just he sat there like this the rest of the time. That was the most fun I had with cover.
Whenever I had, people buzzing my door in New York City, wanting to come up and talk about Jesus, I was always like, I'm sorry, this house worships Satan.
That's great.
America, so let's see. So Ali says, I'm not really sure, but learning different dialects is like learning completely different languages.
Absolutely.
The vocabulary is so vast that the biggest issue I see with is even formal language is different. I wouldn't go that far, but it is a big deal.
Our first year in Arabic, we learned Fusha, which is high standard Arabic. It's the educated Arabic that everybody speaks,
like Jordanians. Or is supposed to speak.
Yeah, well, like the Yemenis are the closest to Fusha. The Saudis claim that they are, but they're not. And then my second year, I studied Khaliji, Gulf dialect Arabic, which is far more difficult. It's got a lot of Farsi in it and just weird words that don't exist anywhere else. I asked this guy one time, my first day in Bahrain, I said, Kaif Halik, how are you? It literally means, what condition are you? Kaif Halik, what is your condition? And he says to me, I forget what he said. Kulishi Zain, Kulishi Zain. And I recognize that as an Iraqi thing. Everything's cool. And then 2 days later, he says to me, Shlonek, which is kind of a contraction for Shu Launek. What color are you? And I looked at him and I said, Mafahemta, I don't understand. He says, Shlonek. And I said, I don't know the response to that. And he says, Ana foga nachal. I said, I'm sitting on top of the palm tree? And he said, yeah, that's what we say here in Bahrain. I said, I asked you what color you are, and you say I'm sitting on top of the palm tree. He said, yeah, that's, how are you? I'm great.
Like I'm on top of the world?
Yeah,
basically?
Top of the world, yeah. I was like, okay.
Top of the palm tree.
Learn something new every day.
No, the palm tree seems like an uncomfortable place to sit. Those leaves be spiky, but what do I know? So Robert Scheuer is asking if we already covered the Brown MIT connection. Also, this Trump fusion deal is interesting as well. Thanks for the kind words. I think we should get into that, right? I mean, so basically the allegation here is that a Portuguese American dude basically shot up a Brown classroom, then shot a nuclear physics professor at MIT, then went to a storage unit and decided to blow his brains out there. Because, the last thing I want to see in this world as I close my dying eyes is a storage unit.
You can say that again, man.
So I guess, we were speculating about the target here. Do we believe this story? I mean, I never like it. It always rubs me the wrong way when the alleged shooter ends up dead, either shot by the cops or committed suicide. It always bugs me. Yeah, now, on the other hand, you could see why someone would do that. Your life is effectively over. You're going to be spending the rest of your life, like Luigi Mangione, in a bunch of hearings and talking to lawyers and going through appeals and warming the inside of a prison cell. So I could see why you might just say, fuck it, I'm out. But does it bug you at all?
Yeah, it bugs me. On the one hand, it bugs me because there's not going to be justice, or the victims and the families of the victims are not going to feel a sense of justice, because this guy's never going to go on trial. They're never going to know why he did this. So that it's going to be difficult for them to receive closure. And on the other hand, there's something satisfying about making the arrest, sending the guy to trial, having him judged by a jury of his peers. And then we get answers. The public gets answers to its questions. Like, what would possess him to do something like this? This guy went to school from 1995 to 2000 with the MIT professor.
Mm-hmm.
So are we talking about a 25 or 30 year grudge? Did they?
It's one hell of a grudge.
Yeah.
And then, no, I'm with you on that. I mean, I always think, that our sentencing is way too long and too draconian.
Yeah,
I always wonder if we had a system that looked more like one of the Scandinavian countries, if people would be less likely to want to do suicide by cop or just old-fashioned suicide, if they might want to be like, I'll have to do my 8 years or whatever. But, life, there will be a life for me at the end of all this. And if they would be likelier to stick around and then thus be available to answer questions about what led them to this.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Space jockeys, John, zero interest in East Asia. That's a bummer for me. I always thought it would be interesting to hear you talk about China and the CCP politics, Japan too.
Yeah, sorry about that. I tried. I've been to East Asia a number of times, and it's lovely. It's beautiful and tropical in many cases, and there's plenty to do, and the economies are advanced, and great museums and beaches and such. But ever since I was a kid, I've just loved the Middle East. I love the history. I love the culture. I love the food. I love the music, even the poetry. I love the Middle East. And then, I don't know, I go to East Asia and I hear tonal languages and they mean nothing to me. Arabic to me is, the Arabic language is like poetry to me, because it's very, very mathematical in its construct, right? So every word in Arabic derives from a 3-letter root, a 3-letter verb. And so on my first day of Arabic, the teacher wrote 30 3-letter verbs on the board. And he said, if you can learn the 10 cases of these verbs, you're going to speak Arabic. And he was exactly right. It took months, 4 or 5 months, for it to finally click in my head that everything is like a mathematical problem, where the verb is the very first word in the sentence. And if you know the verb, you know what the rest of the sentence is. It just clicked one night. I remember dreaming in Arabic for the first time. I had been in training since August, and it was April, and I had a dream in Arabic, and it wasn't gibberish Arabic. It was actual Arabic that I understood myself when I was saying it in the dream. And I woke up and I remember thinking, I'm going to do this. This is going to work out.
I don't believe in mysticism. I don't know how you feel about it, but I always wonder about things like this, like your affinity for Arabic and Arabic culture.
My parents never understood it.
In a foreign, in a previous life, because it's like that way for me and Central Asia. I love everything about it. The food, like you said, and like something, I don't have a lot of practice doing it, but man, horses love me and I love horses and I do great on them. And I don't really know why. And, I take to the language really well. The food is like, even the food that people hate, like fermented mare's milk.
Yes. I've heard about that.
I love it. I can't get enough of it.
Have you had tea with yak butter?
I have, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that any good?
I like it. Most people hate it. Most people are like,
I would like to try it.
Yeah, no. To me, it's like, well, part of the secret is these are foods that are meant to be consumed at high altitude, and it makes a difference.
Interesting.
So if you're like in the mountains of Tajikistan, like high in the Pamirs, it just seems to like take the edge off the effect of altitude. What do you make about the fact, and I've got we got a bunch of more questions to answer, but what do you make of the fact that Trump has suspended the visa lottery system? I mean, I never understood the lottery system anyway.
I can explain the lottery system.
Tell me.
Ted Kennedy created the lottery system.
Mm-hmm.
And it was designed initially to give Irish citizens an inordinate leg up on everybody else in the world.
Really?
To bring more Irish into the United States. Uh-huh.
Because it's a quota, right? Like there's a certain
quota.
number of people per year per nationality, right? Like
right.
X number of Irish, X number of Italians, and so on.
And it can be years after you apply that you actually win the lottery. I have two Irish friends. One actually accepted the visa and came to the United States and is now an American. The other married a Bahraini friend of mine, and she ended up not accepting the visa. Instead, they've been married since I went to their wedding in 1995. They're in Bahrain with children and grandchildren now.
But everyone's got to be vetted, right? I mean, the vetting process is the same. So what is there any reason other than just rank partisan politics and, the anti-immigration push for Trump to, draw a bead on this particular program? It seems so reactive. Like this guy came in this way. Okay, fine. That program is to blame.
Right.
It's so, it's simplistic even by American political standards.
It's not right.
Yeah.
These people are vetted. Right. I got a consular commission. I went through the consular course. It's freaking hard. If you're not an American, it's hard to get into the United States. In Bahrain, our embassy was very, very small. So we had to double up. Sometimes I was assigned as the economic officer. Sometimes I had to cover political. Sometimes I had to cover consular. Sometimes I had to cover uses, communications. So there was a period of 2 or 3 weeks where I was the acting consular officer. And if you're, for example, from India and you apply for a visa, you have to bring a filing cabinet full of documents to back up your visa application. Bank statements, letters from employers. It's ridiculous how much vetting is involved. And then I tell you to come back, 4 weeks from now, so I have time to go through your paperwork. It's very rare for us to just, somebody comes up to the window, I want a visa, here's the application, here's the $100, and you just stamp the passport.
And, they're human beings. Human beings snap sometimes, whether they're American or foreign. There's nothing much there's no way to control for that. Like this Portuguese guy, assuming that he's everything they say that he is. Forget it. Am I the only one that's surprised? Thanks, by the way, for the $4.99. Am I the only one that isn't surprised that Noam Chomsky was friends with Epstein? The guy is a creep. Keep up the amazing work.
May I say something about that?
Yeah, I have stuff to say too. Go ahead.
So I know Noam Chomsky, not well, but we've exchanged emails. I can tell you just as a person, Noam Chomsky's a dick. He's always been a dick. He's a dick to everybody. And when a reporter asked him to explain, his relationship with Epstein, and his response was, go fuck yourself, or whatever it was that he said, that's Noam Chomsky. So the answer is no. We should not at all be surprised that he's implicated in this Epstein scandal. And then when other people say, oh, no, Chomsky, they never actually met except maybe once at a party and Chomsky had his money invested. No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all.
While we're on the topic of Epstein, how about that David Brooks?
Yeah.
So David Brooks, columnist, center-right columnist for the New York Times. Here's the thing. He met him. He apparently at least hung out with him at a party, right? At least once. I think that he did have he wrote about this multiple times and basically was like, this isn't a big deal and we shouldn't be paying that much attention to it. And he never once mentioned, oh, by the way, I met him. I mean, the New York Times is saying that there's no obligation to disclose, and I suppose technically that's probably true. This reminds me of but it's kind of like you should just know better. It reminds me of it shouldn't be a rule. It's obvious if I were writing about a random person in the news and I had met them, I would mention it in my piece, like I've met this guy.
Right? Transparency. It's all about transparency.
It's relevant to the readers. The readers, not to mention, you might have insight, and you could even just say, "Look, he seemed fine to me. I didn't know." That's fine. Just say that, it's, I didn't know he was a lech. Whatever.
No, how are you supposed to know?
Yeah, I mean, to me, his silence on this is suspicious.
I agree with you.
I think it's sus. I don't know if it's a firing offense, but I would say it's a double secret probation offense. I mean, if I'm at the Times, if I'm his editor at the Times, I'm displeased. I'm like, what else are you not telling us?
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Jaweed Monseni, 81. John, by the way, in terms of Chomsky, I should say, full disclosure, I had a funny story about blurbs. So when I put out one of my very first books, I reached out to, your publisher is like, oh, can you get anyone to blurb your book at eLefties? So I reached out to Chomsky, and he wrote back to me and said that he didn't know anything about cartooning. He wrote back, he's like, I'm afraid I don't know anything about this area. 6 months later, he gives a blurb to my big rival in editorial cartooning, Tom Tomorrow. So I decided in my next book to just quote, I'm afraid I don't know anything about this area.
That's great.
Noam Chomsky on the back of my book.
Did you actually do that?
I did.
That's great.
It's on the back of the book. And so I was like, I'm a cartoonist. I can do anything, whatever I want, right? That's the whole point of being a punk rock cartoonist. Then, 10 years later, my new publisher was friends with Chomsky and reached out to him, and Noam had heard about what I did, and he goes, just to avoid Ted doing something like that again, I'll give him a blurb.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, yeah, whatever. Jaweed Mancini wants to know, John, if you think that Islam has a terrorism problem as Sunni Islam does.
Elements of it do, sure. The American embassy in Beirut didn't blow itself up, nor did the Marine barracks. So yeah, I think it's not necessarily about the mainstream sects of Sunni Islam and Shia Islam. I think it's like in any religion. I mean, there are radical Christians and radical Jews, and people are people, and some of them are bad.
Right, no question. So let's see. What size? Gabriel wants to know what size military force would a combined. Oh, by the way, if you guys also want to let us know if you'd want to do another call-in show, let us know, because we're working.
Yeah, that was fun.
It was really fun for us, but it's not fun for us if it's not also fun for you guys. So just, it could be a one or it could be a multiple time thing. We're thinking of doing it again, though, a lot. Gabriel wants to know what size military force would a combined Russian-Asian force need to be to overrun Europe? I'm laughing. Where cities like Rome, Berlin, and Paris would be occupied in a matter of weeks. I say that's fucking impossible.
I agree.
These countries are nuclear powers.
Right.
They're just it'll never get to that point. I mean, Nazi Germany wasn't able to do it, and they started in the middle of Europe, right? and they couldn't occupy the whole thing. They didn't have Switzerland.
That's right.
France was too big to chew off, right?
Agreed.
That's why they had to have Vichy.
Yeah.
So it's not possible. I mean,
I agree. Not possible.
That's another reason why I think it's ridiculous. The whole NATO, scare stuff about Russia is ridiculous. Like, then why do you have nukes? What's the point of this?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Here we go. Frasmataz, is it possible, John, to love Arabic and hate Hebrew just as a language? For me, it's the Israeli accent. It's so fake. Why does it have a Frenchness to it? Hey, watch it. But
it does have a Frenchness to it.
But their Arabic but their grammar is Arabic, no?
Yeah, their grammar is Arabic. Yeah. Yep. Excuse me. It's funny. The Hebrew accent bothers me as well, but not everybody's Hebrew accent. It's Israelis of European origin, of recent European origin, who I think have that, what to me sounds slightly French in the pronunciation of some of the consonants. But Middle Eastern Jews don't speak Hebrew in the same way.
What's the linguistic connection between, I'm afraid, I confess ignorance here, between Hebrew and Arabic?
Oh, they're both Semitic languages, so the construct is exactly the same.
So are they all descended from Sanskrit?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, you can see the similarity.
I was at the CIA with a guy who just had this crazy facility for languages. He was Jewish and he learned Hebrew as a child growing up and going to synagogue. And then when he went into Arabic training, it was just like, boom. By
the way,
he spoke Arabic just like that.
Nobody spoke Hebrew until the 1870s.
That's exactly right.
Okay. For 2,000 years.
Dead language.
Nobody. So how do they know how it's supposed to be pronounced? Is this like sort of like when they dig up like sheet music from the 1700s?
Right.
And for music that was played with instruments that don't even exist now.
That's right.
And nobody knows what it was supposed to sound like, really, right?
I agree.
So, I mean, isn't Hebrew kind of just made up? Isn't it possible that if there were a time machine and you sent like Benjamin Netanyahu, back to Jerusalem in like 50 BCE, that they'd be like, what the fuck are you saying? We don't understand anything you're saying.
Exactly right, man.
All right. Just curious. The whole thing's very strange. All right. Kyle says, I speak good Alsatian and no one understands my fascination with Alsace. I totally understand your fascination with Alsace. Alsace is incredibly interesting and bizarre. And the food is cool. The people are if any place that's gone back and forth between two cultures in different wars is always interesting.
I agree. Somebody also wrote a second ago about dialects in Greece. Absolutely true, man. In fact, my family comes from Rhodes, and a lot of my relatives, all of my relatives in Rhodes speak with Rhodian accents, which to me are difficult. And I can say this because I'm Rhodian. It sounds kind of low class next to sort of the national Attican Athenian accent. I don't like the Rhodian pronunciation of a lot of words. Don't like it at all.
Frasmataz is asking you another question. How do the Zionist/Israeli government use the Sykes-Picot Accord over the last 100 years? And is it even relevant anymore? Seems like they're sledgehammering it. They're covering it up, is what they're doing.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the legitimacy of Israel, such as it is, right? They claim it's all about like, well, our roots go back here for thousands of years. It's like big whoop. I mean,
yeah.
by that standards, I mean, the Russians can claim Finland, right?
Exactly.
It's like so what? And people have moved around a lot over the last 2,000 years, and very few people are still where they started 2000. At that rate, I don't know. It's like the people who left the Franks and the movement from Germany into France. I don't know. This could go on and on.
Ted,
but it's a British colonial. It's a British settler colonial project. It is.
It is, and it's not just there. It's all over the world.
Yeah.
Ted, anyway. Do you think that it's the Yiddish influence? It must be the Yiddish influence.
Of what's that? What is the Yiddish?
This odd French-like pronunciation of Hebrew.
Yeah, you're right. That has to be it, right?
Yeah.
Well, Yiddish is a hodgepodge, right?
Yeah,
of
it
like
is.
Russian, German.
It originated, I think,
countries.
in Hungary. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's basically a pidgin.
Yeah, it's like a pigeon. Where was I? I was in like Papua New Guinea or something. I think I was in Papua New Guinea, and I was in this hotel, and there was the do not disturb. On the one side, it said "Do not disturb" in English, and on the other side, it was written in Pidgin, which I had never seen before in my life, and it said "You," the letter U, no, Ken, Ken, come, cum, in. You know, Ken, come in.
I kind of like that.
And I was like, hey, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, we could stand more actual phonetic pronunciation in the English language. Frasmataz said, I always told my dad not to trust Noam. Here's my thing with Noam. It's politics. Everybody thinks he's like a socialist, and he's not.
He's not.
He's really sort of a liberal libertarian is what he is.
He's a liberal
and the
libertarian.
only reason he became so famous was because he's erudite, and he was from MIT, and he was a leading opponent of the war in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And that's really what it boils down to. He's not a leftist.
No, he's actually very much a capitalist. If you read the articles about how much he forked over to Epstein to invest for him.
Yeah, no, he's totally a capitalist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just like personally. I mean, even ideologically, I mean, he does not favor the overthrow of capitalism.
No.
MT16, thanks for the $20. John, did you have any downtime when you were in Pakistan? I know the hours must have been very long tracking people down.
I actually had a little bit of downtime in Pakistan. So what I did, I had one Saturday morning that I was free. So I drove up into the foothills of the Himalayas, and I came upon a tree that was completely filled with monkeys. And so I parked the car, got out of the car. They all like perked up. I was taking some pictures, and then one of them started screaming at me. And it made the whole tree full of monkeys start screaming at me. And so I just got in the car and drove away. The Himalayas are actually absolutely stunning. You've never seen anything like them. Or I had never seen anything like them. And did I have any other downtime? No, actually, no. It wasn't unusual to work 14, 16 hours a day. That was actually the norm. And that was 7 days a week. So I just had that little block of 4 hours, and I was able to go see a tree full of monkeys.
I found Pakistan. I liked the northern areas, right? I
agree. I like
beautiful
Kashmir, and I'll add too that the food in Pakistan is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely.
And wonderful. I can't replicate the chai. It kind of drives me crazy. It's the only tea I like. I hate tea, basically.
Yeah, I'm not a tea guy.
I'm a coffee person all the way. My one exception is Pakistani chai, served that's been boiling for hours, and served in a metal cup. It's so like if you're run down or depressed or tired or whatever, altitude sickness, you get one of those things, you're just like Popeye with spinach. I mean, it's amazing.
Yes, indeed.
All right, let's hit some more stories here. Shall we talk about cannabis?
Yeah, I'm happy about that. This is exactly the opposite of what I expected Donald Trump to do. Donald Trump is famously anti-substances, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever.
Understandably so.
Understandably, he had this family thing. His brother, was a longtime alcoholic, and yesterday he lifted some of the restrictions on cannabis, which is going to be great for everybody. If you've got cancer, glaucoma, depression, this, that, the other thing, or you just want to get high, it makes it a lot easier.
My biggest concern, and really probably it's my only concern about weed, is the fact that people who are stoned while driving, they're under the influence, but there's no way for them to be tested reliably.
Yeah, and then if you can't test them reliably, then you have to rely on the cop giving you the the little test to follow your eyes and touch your nose, and then forget it, you're screwed.
By the way, so like, yeah, I had that happen in LA where I got pulled over at like 3:00 in the morning. I was weaving all over the Hollywood freeway because my GPS was doing that thing like, second to the left lane. No, wait, I meant alt middle lane. Wait, I meant left lane. So like, like trying to find it. And anyway, the thing is, he made me recite the alphabet backwards, and I remember just thinking
backwards. I can't recite the alphabet backwards.
I was like, I bet a lot of people can't do that. Stone cold sober at like 10:00 in the morning.
No.
Those tests, by the way, are just complete garbage.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
And by the way, Ray says they drive slower, Ted. Yeah, they do. And by the way, driving slower isn't always safe. Believe me, if you're on the New Jersey Turnpike where the average speed is 80 and you're driving 40, that's not safe.
No, that's impeding the flow of traffic.
Yeah. My mom got a ticket for that in north of Cincinnati, where it was a 70 zone or a 75 zone. She was driving like 45 and she got pulled over. And I was like, Mom, I don't understand. You drive 75 in a 20. So just imagine you're in a school zone when you're on the highway. It's the same thing.
Oh my goodness.
So I mean, we know this is a result of the cannabis lobby. So is this basically just a net good? I mean, look, the thing is, John, there is concern. We do have to talk about this, that, today's weed isn't the weed of our high school days. It's much more powerful. And there's been, particularly for younger people, credible reports of psychosis.
Yeah, that's kind of a big deal now. This Dr. Phil's been yelling about it for the last couple of weeks.
Well, so yeah. I mean, it's funny to me. There are people who, like on Fox, who are complaining about like the smell on the streets of New York. Big whoop. Man, you got worse things. They got worse smells on the streets of New York. Trust me.
Here we call it DC barbecue.
Yeah, well, wasn't DC one of the very first decriminalization locations?
Yeah, right around the same time as Oregon. Yeah,
I think it's like
the DC law is weird. You're not allowed to smoke it in public, even though everybody does.
Yeah,
and even at home, you're not allowed to smoke it on your front stoop or porch, but you can smoke it in the backyard, which is just makes no sense to me.
People are accusing me of what I just said is not true. It is true. It is true. If it's not true, you're going to have to, fess up, put up, make an argument.
I've never been in any city that smelled as bad as Paris, though. Paris is bad. People just relieving themselves anywhere they happen to be standing. It was like Delhi in that respect.
Yeah, well, there's dog poo all over the place. I think Paris is a smelly city because of it's in a bowl, it's in a trough. So there's no good air circulation. When it was a Roman city of what was it? It was Lutece, and before that, I forget what the Latin name was. But in Roman times, being assigned to Paris was considered a demotion because the weather sucked.
Wow.
And if you were a Roman official and you fucked up, they sent you to Paris.
The British Embassy here in Washington gets a 15% pay differential for the heat in the summer. They get an extra 15% of their salaries because it's so hot here.
That
ridiculous.
At least it's not like whatever buzzy bug was causing Havana syndrome. Yeah. Whoever said that they've got Godna says I'll send sources. All right. And everybody who listens to the show knows I admit when I'm wrong, which certainly has happened, and it will happen again in the future. And I may be wrong now. So
but what I've read though too supports what you said, that it's far more potent today than it was in the 70s.
Yeah, I'm not a user. I totally have never believed in criminalization of any drug, and certainly not cannabis. And I have a lot of my friends who use it, so it's not at all uncommon for me. I've been around it a lot, so I don't have any. But it is just objectively true that the measurement of THC and all that is just. It's so like, for example, Johnny Shanks-a-lot says it went from 1% to 30% plus THC. I mean, I think people who've been smoking for years may not realize, because they've been smoking for years. It's like it's like the frog in the pot thing. You just don't,
right. You don't realize it.
Yeah. Like if they increase, John, an example of that is the alcohol content of wine has sort of increased slowly over the last 40 years. I mean, wine, 6, 7, 8% alcohol by volume wine wasn't uncommon when you and I were like in college. Now it's at least 12. It's 12, but 12 is standard. And, I don't notice. I mean, the more the better.
Yeah.
Right. As far as I'm concerned. Anyway, thank you, Sharpie. One of the few non-grifting podcasts literally ever. Here's Monopoly money, $50. Yeah, I don't know. If we could figure out how to grift, we would. It's just not our way. So speaking of grift, that's a good segue. Let's talk about Minnesota, John. I mean,
this is just nuts.
Disgusting. And
Tim Walz should be impeached. Not because this thievery happened on his watch, but because he went after the whistleblowers who reported it. He fired some. He initiated prosecutions of others. Walz has to go.
You're right.
This is a violation of the Whistleblower Protection Act.
Yeah. Not to mention they were right and he was wrong.
That's right. Exactly.
So on those grounds alone, and not to mention also, it's like, you're not personally in charge of all this money, right? But you're the governor, right? The buck stops there. You run the state. Like when you've got over $9 billion in, federal to state funding that vanishes as a result of this ongoing, sophisticated, years-long scam, which probably predates 2018. Mm-hmm. You know that. It's like, then that's on you, right? You failed to supervise. You failed to appoint people who were competent enough to make sure this wasn't going to happen. I mean, I always say fraud and waste are like the price you pay just to have welfare, a welfare system. And I'm okay with that, but within reason. It's kind of like, it's one thing like if your supermarket has 2% of the stock is getting shoplifted, but if it's half, you're in real, I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Agreed.
So,
agreed. I mean, and to make it worse, this money apparently went to, a Shabab or Al Qaeda or people that, mean us harm, that are actively targeting Americans, our own tax money. So the boom has to be lowered on a whole bunch of people in Minnesota for this, starting at the very top with the governor.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. So it's bad. Yeah. So I guess the argument here is that, like, technically speaking, there's some people who say that today's weed is no stronger. But I mean, look, the thing is, I knew people who smoked weed in high school and college, and the weed was a joke. It was like chopped in with oregano. It was like, you could tell it was like not the real thing. Even just the smell.
I remember the oregano thing. Yeah.
I mean, you look at like a beautiful bud now, like that you get from a high-end dispensary, and it's like got this rich, fecund smell. I mean, I have a strong sense of smell. I can tell the difference, and I have sense memory. I remember what weed smelled like and looked like in 1979. It ain't the same.
No. I think it smells much stronger now than it did back then, too. In addition to being different, it's just stronger now.
Yeah. Well, it's obvious because it's regulated. It's and there's real competition in the marketplace. I mean, everything happened that needed to happen. I mean, it was garbage before, and it was. I mean, people mixed in. I mean, I knew guys who ended up overdosing on angel dust in the 80s because it was mixed in with the weed, because the weed probably didn't even have any weed content in it, right? So, government having this be a legal product is better for society. It's better, no question about it. I mean, but I just do think that I wish we knew more about it.
I agree.
Okay, so shall we talk about the DNC, our favorite entity?
I'm so mad about this.
You and me
both. The Democrats are just such frauds. Such frauds. So they did this internal investigation about why they lost and how they lost the 2024 election. And they had been saying, we're going to do this thing. We're going to release it. We're going to have this national debate about the future of the party. And then they said, no, we're just going to cover it up. We're not going to release it to anybody. And we're all just supposed to say, oh, okay. No worries then. We'll just take your word for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so here's the thing. I mean, I bet first of all, that report's going to leak because there's people inside the DNC who are very displeased about this. The DNC is, obviously it's the corporate wing of the party. And like you said at the top of the show, John, they're trying to quash the reality of the schism within the Democratic Party as if that's going to help. But I mean, John, I assume the CIA did after action reports whenever there was a fuck up or a success, right? So that you learn what went right, what didn't go right, what should you replicate, what should you do differently. I mean, most political parties do the same thing after a campaign. I would hope the Republicans do the same thing after 2024. Why would a party commission this report? What could be in that report that's so explosive that he decided to the DNC chairman decided to sit on it?
It has to be about cultural issues. It has to be, because there is a real split
the polling
in the Democratic Party. That's
that
right.
Shit polls really badly.
Really badly. Mm-hmm. Really badly.
And they know it, and they don't want to admit, they don't want it to come from them.
That's right. That's what it is.
And John, we've got just a couple minutes left before we call it a week, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about this Judge Hannah Dugan. She's the one who we can now say, not allegedly, she's the one. She's just been found guilty of basically trying to spirit out a defendant in one of her cases to try to avoid them falling into the clutches of ICE, who were hanging out outside her courtroom. She obviously was pissed off about that and tried to, it didn't work, but basically she's found guilty of obstruction of justice. It was a split jury decision. Obviously she's going to appeal. She's basically saying that she was trying to maintain decorum in her courtroom. ICE is saying it's safer to apprehend people at their court hearings than out on the street. I guess so, because they have to go through like metal detectors and stuff, so they're not carrying a gun or anything like that. But I mean, obviously, if you're an undocumented worker or an illegal immigrant, whatever you want to call them, you're stupid if you go to a court date these days, right? So I mean, that's really the takeaway. Anyway, what do you make of this judge? I mean, to me, this is what she really is guilty of, is civil disobedience. She probably is guilty of this law. I'm not surprised that she was convicted. I'm disappointed that she was convicted because I agree with you. This was an act of civil disobedience. She was trying to stand up against what she believed to be federal overreach, and it nipped her in the butt. Yeah. I mean, so she's kind of a hero. I mean, it was interesting. They interviewed the foreman of the jury, and they asked him how he felt, and he said, "I don't feel good." So I assume it was one of those things where we had to find her guilty because the law was clear, but we think she's a good person. That was my read. Yeah,
and that and a couple of bucks will get you a coffee.
Indeed. Well, doing the right thing, as you know, isn't always like it doesn't always have great legal consequences.
Right.
So, John, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for another great week here on DeProgram.
Enjoy the weekend.
Thanks everyone for your support. Please like, follow, and share the show. We'll be back Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern time. We'll be here all week. Actually, we're taking Christmas Day off. But we will be around every other day, including Boxing Day on the 26th. So tune in for that. Stay tuned for the TMI show with me, Ted Rall, and Manila Chan, coming right up after this. If you're on Rumble, you'll be whisked away magically by the raid. If you're on YouTube, you've got to actually make an effort and type a few things and find it over there. Thanks, everyone. Robbie West, see you in the background there. See you on the other side. Bye, John. See you soon.
Bye-bye.